Welcome to the Debrief with Rob and Sam, a bi-weekly Formula One show breaking down the latest F1 race, giving you a full debrief of our thoughts and more from the race. My name's Rob, he's Sam, and we have a lot to talk about from the Australian Grand Prix.
Oh boy, we do. Well, if I could summarize the Australian Grand Prix into 3 words, it was chaotic, exciting, and a tad bit long, most because of all the red flags and yellow flags. But there's lots of question marks pointed at the FIA and the Australian GP organizers. It actually was reported that after the race, the Australian GP organizers were summoned to the stewards due to their behavior and the fact that they really didn't do a great job monitoring fans and stopping them getting onto the court. So that was a big thing for sure.
Yeah, I know. I heard a little bit of speculation like that too, but I guess sources have confirmed it. Why don't you go ahead and hit the people with your driver of the day?
It's got to be the one, the only Sergio Perez. Man, battled back from starting the pit lane to P5. You know, made lots of great overtakes. Managed medium tires really well on his pushing up. He was pushing up the pace, making his way up the field. He got a little bit lucky with the safety cars, albeit for sure, like it did benefit him, like obviously early on being able to. Now, it was interesting as well, like it just as a little side note, but it was interesting to see them pit from the medium tires so early on. Like he was on the hards to start. I was like, okay, that's an interesting strategy. He's going to stay out long to the end because we've seen that time and time again with drivers who start from the pit lane. They start on hards, they go longer, and then they will pit, on a different strategy. But because of the safety car, he was like, okay, I'm back on everyone else's strategy. The regular strategy of just, okay, now I can just, pit from medium. So that was an interesting decision. I think it really worked out well for him in the end. And it was a great drive overall. So yeah, he's my driver of the day, P5. It got to P5. So who's your driver of the day?
No, I got to agree with you. I mean, I think the biggest thing I took away from his drive, of course, obviously getting into the points from where he started. I think it was just from the beginning, like he understood what was that like what he had to do, and he understood what the message was. Like I got the feeling that the entire race he was racing hard, and he was racing way harder than everybody else was, and obviously the results show that. It's also like he brought in another 11 points for Red Bull. And I know like you say what you want about that point because I don't think it matters how many points he brings in because they're still probably going to win. But all things considered, like, when you look at the other teams that they're competing with, Ferrari, another terrible day, Mercedes and their semi-okay day, and then a good day for Aston Martin, right? With the 3-4 finish. So I think, those 11 points should be noticed. So
no, and it's not like you're not totally wrong. Like you're totally correct because in like Formula One DNFs it's massive because your points, whatever you thought were you're going to score, your estimated points that you're going to score, you now have to cut that down by like 15, 20 points. And it's a massive impact on your kind of fight to constructor standings in terms of maintaining at the top, be able to stay at the top, or also be able to kind of work your way up the field as well. That's another big thing as well.
For sure. So. The first thing I wanted to point out for our takeaways, kind of a little lighthearted, but we'll get into obviously Red Bull and the top dogs a little bit later on. But I wanted to shout out McLaren and Piastri. For third race in F1 scores points in his hometown. Like that's an incredible feeling, and it couldn't have happened in a better place. So a big shout out to McLaren for finishing where they finished, and obviously Piastri for checking that one off the bucket list.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I fully agree. That's a great thing to look at as well. Like it's one of my things as well. Like I say McLaren put together a nice weekend to get both cars in the points or on the board. They're up until like they have 12 points on the board. It's not a lot, but it's a few, and it's a start to where they can kind of slowly make progress towards the rest of the season. And it's great to see Oscar Piastri score some points so early into his F1 career because when you look at it, like he had a lot of pressure. He still has a lot of pressure facing him as a driver that has won a lot. So when you have that opportunity to score points into your third race, that is massive for an F1 driver. So I really think that, he did a great job, as well as Lando Norris as well. He was like, but I think Oscar Piastri got help through the red flags and with the Sainz penalty to get into points. But I think regardless away from that, Lando Norris had a great day through and through all weekend, was really on it. And it's good to see him back because I'm sure he was struggling the first 2 races, not only physically, like, with the car as well, but also mentally as well, like dealing with that, those mental issues, not finishing in the points. So
one other thing I want to add on top of that, I'll speak for myself here. I'm born late 2002. Piastri is born April 2001. This is a guy that
Okay.
is like, what, 14 or 15 months older than I am. I'll tell you
Yeah.
right now, if I'm in Formula One, I'm not sniffing anywhere close to accomplishing what he's accomplished. So just put that into perspective for everybody out there.
No, I know it's crazy how young he is and how talented he is at such a young age. Like any other, really, you look at other Formula One drivers that entered into the sport at a young age. Max Verstappen being one of them, Lewis Hamilton another one. Lando Norris was another guy that was really young as well. So it's just crazy to look at. Like the guy is what, like he's a year younger than us, and he's oh no, so a
Yeah.
year older. Sorry, a year older than us. I remember, a year older than us, and he's in Formula One. It's just
Yeah.
absolute mad. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, my second takeaway is focusing on Mercedes. Now, obviously, they did. I'm not like going to first focus on qualifying first. They did to make some massive improvements to kind of get closer to Aston Martin and get ahead of Aston Martin in terms of the qualifying pace. But again, on race day, that's all. That's only time it matters. You know, qualifying is qualifying, but on Sunday, that's when you get the points. And unfortunately, obviously, Russell got DNF'd his car. Like it was no fault of his own, really. Just a mechanical or reliability issue with the car, with the Mercedes W14, which I was mentioned later as well, reliability. And it's just really tough to see. But other than that, I think they had a great day. Like Lewis Hamilton was really looking strong. He came out of the gate firing. He had both restarts. He got past Max Verstappen, had better race restarts, better starts off the line, which was great to see. Got past him, challenged him a bit for a couple laps, definitely made his life a lot harder than it usually is. But again, with that DRS, Max Verstappen was able to make pass, but still, slowed him down a little bit. So that's my second takeaway regarding Mercedes and their kind of okay-ish day, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I'm building off of that, like I was just about to say, like I had mentioned earlier, like kind of so on the day. Uh what a rough day to be George Russell, on top of the
Yeah.
fact, like, he was flying out of the gates, like flying. And then for him to DNF when he DNF'd, like that's just, you hate to see it. But on the contrary, I know it doesn't
Mhm.
really kind of have that much of an impact on this race in terms of, the grand scheme of things. But Lewis Hamilton, the first driver in Formula One history to score a podium in 17 consecutive seasons.
That's
That is
crazy.
absurd. So,
Yeah.
look at the bigger picture. Obviously, it means a lot for Lewis and Mercedes, but it was a tough day to be a George Russell.
Yeah, and I think even before that DNF, he kind of got screwed over by the safety car because he was up until I think he was P2 or P3. No, he was P2, and then they pitted him the lap before the safety car. He came in really early, and then the safety car came in the next lap, and then everyone else got a free pit stop, and
Yeah.
he fell down the order down to P7, and then from there it just really went downhill from there. So tough day to be George Russell, tough day to be a George Russell fan for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I think one
Now,
other
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
one other thing I wanted to mention. I think that this race we're kind of seeing, and I mentioned it a little bit last week or on our last episode with Ferrari, and you're kind of starting to see the drivers kind of speak out and kind of getting fed up with everything that's been going on. You take a look at this past race. Obviously, Leclerc DNFs like 3 turns into the race. That
That's
can't
tough.
feel good.
Unfortunate. Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
that can't feel good. So
Hmm.
I think the biggest thing I took away from Ferrari's day was that, in the past we've seen them not be able to compete because it's been problems with the car, whether it was whatever type of reliability issue, the
Yeah.
strategy wasn't there, right? This race here, this is
Hmm.
a little bit different because, as far as I'm concerned, there wasn't anything really wrong with the car, or at least they didn't even get to that point to
No.
if anything was wrong with the car. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Leclerc DNFing when he DNF'd, like sure, that's off the table,
Hmm.
that's done. But then even like Sainz, like just kind of
Yeah.
the way he got knocked out of the points, like that's not really like the issues that we've been seeing Ferrari take on. So I don't know if they're cursed or like I don't know what to call it, but I think like as if the reliability and all the internal problems I'll say that were in the past weren't enough. I think this weekend was just another kick a man while he's down. Like it was just kind of crappy timing.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate, honestly, for Charles Leclerc. Obviously, he, spins out, gets a little bit too aggressive, a little too cheeky into turn one with Lance Stroll. And I also think it's ironic that both Ferrari drivers made contact with an Aston Martin driver, and somehow that affected the race in a negative way, which I do want to get to later on as well, mentioning about Carlos Sainz's penalty. But regardless, going back before that, I think, yeah, we're starting to, that's a fair point. It's one of the things that I wanted to talk about as well. Not about, well, more about something different, but I think with the point that you made, it's so true, honestly, because I think, yeah, like this was definitely a race where there's a lot of more driver errors because I think they were very aggressive. They are hungry for the points, hungry out of the gate. Leclerc's like, I've struggled the first two races. I need to make a big impact. Like I need to get up to the front here. I need to fight for a win. And in doing so, he made contact with Lance Stroll and, he spun out, beached his car. He was out of the race in lap one. Then Carlos Sainz obviously falls out of the points, kind of works his way back in. Then on the race restart, collides with, comes a little too hot into the corner, hits Alonso. He spins out, Alonso spins out. Then everything else happens, and then they reset the order. It's just a little bit madness for sure. But going on to my third point, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want to focus more about reliability. And it's just something that I've noticed a lot this year so far between Ferrari's reliability issues in Bahrain, Red Bull's slight issues in Jeddah, not fully concerning, but slightly concerning, and now Mercedes now having a DNF. So it's like, it's not like it's affecting one team or another. It seems that this year, and we're definitely going to consider probably see some retirements not next week. In the next couple of weeks, obviously at the next race at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, because obviously we saw Charles Leclerc DNF there last year. We saw Max Verstappen DNF due to a tire failure. It's going to be a really hot temperature in Azerbaijan. The tires drivers were complaining about the tire temperatures as well for the Australian Grand Prix. So there's going to be a lot of potential things that could really impact the race order and what happens. And I think reliability is going to be something to continue to watch. We always watch that every year, but I think more than ever this year, because of how early on, it's not just affecting one team like it was with Red Bull last year. It's affecting multiple teams on the grid. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens and how teams can really counterbalance that. It was like porpoising last year. Like every team seemed to suffer. Some teams dealt with it better than others. So we'll see how each team deals with reliability. That's what I'll say to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think like you mentioned, it definitely becomes a lot more of a pressing, I guess you could call it an issue, but definitely a more pressing topic of discussion once, it kind of starts to bleed into everybody and start to affect everybody. But yeah, that's a really good point. When you look at the race as a whole, how would you grade it?
I gave this grade the same grade I gave Jeddah. I mean, maybe I'm not really a good grader, no teacher or anything like that, but I said A-. So there's lots of action in the opening laps. Safety cars made for some interesting strategy decisions. Obviously, I mentioned Checo Perez earlier, and obviously a lot of the cars near the back, like P14, P15 around then, were kind of just changing onto the mediums, kind of changing away from that hard strategy, which did make it interesting. But after really the red flag restart, after Albon crashed out, which was very unfortunate, obviously, because he was running really strong at P6, looking solid points day for Williams there. It really wasn't much from lap 30 to lap 55-ish. And then kind of everything at the end was like a massive excitement, fuel-filled race at the end. So it kind of was exciting, mid, not really boring, kind of fall asleep, turn it off, and then turn it back on, or do something else for a little bit, get distracted, be on your phone, and then get back up to the high point where it was a great ending. I think that the FIA did the right decision in the way that they handled the race restart. The only thing I will say, and I think it's not even something that I kind of more thinking about, it's something that I think Max Futrell said, one of Lando Norris's friends. He said this on a stream, and he was talking about Carlos Sainz's penalty. He was saying okay, I understand that's a penalty. He took him out of the race, he took him out of the order. But the fact that the FIA then reset the order and then allowed Alonso to regain his P3, why does Sainz get that penalty? It doesn't make sense, because Sainz should just stay. If you're gonna act like the accident didn't happen, he's able to, in the event that Alonso went out and they're okay, Alonso's out, he's out of the race. Now, if he'd gotten out of the race and beached his car, that penalty is definitely warranted, because now Alonso's out of the race, he's out of the points. Because the fact that they were able to recover the car, they reset the order, not they just, okay, you're out of the race, whatever, you're back at the grid, you're down at P12, we're going to restart the race because you spun out. No, we're okay, we're going to restart the order. So it's a fair point to be made as well. So I just want to get your thoughts on, do you think that Carlos Sainz's penalty was fair, or do you think that it was a little harsh considering the circumstances of what the FIA did in terms of the race restart?
Yeah, I definitely think it was a little bit too harsh. I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, and overall for the race, don't get me wrong, I thought it was great. I thought it had, like you mentioned, it had its high points, it had its low points. Kind of going back to as well, the yellow flag with Albon when he crashed.
Right. Okay.
I don't think it was a little I don't think I'm not saying it was unwarranted, but I definitely think it could have kind of been avoided. I think even when he did crash, like Russell drove through and you could hear him on the radio saying like, "Oh, we've raced through, I think it was sand." He goes, "We've raced through sand before." And he was kind of saying like, is that really necessary? So I kind of do see the kind of duality amongst both
Right.
calls, but I again, it's like we've mentioned it before with like a lot of the other confrontations that the FIA and a bunch of race stewards have gotten into. It's a tough job.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's a quick in the moment decision. And it kind of seems like regardless of how whatever the call you make, obviously someone's going to be upset, someone's going to be happy about it, someone's going to lose, someone's going to win from it. But yeah, I definitely do think it was a little odd. But
No.
in terms of
Mhm.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
no, no, no. I was gonna say in terms of that, I think like yeah, like you said as well, like people are gonna be upset about like me being a Verstappen fan. Like I was like, okay, that's good because at that point he was down in P3, he was struggling. I was like, no, this is good. Like it tightens up the bunch again. It gives him a little a chance for a race restart, obviously. But I think to the point as well, like I understand, yeah, like you may think that it might have been a little weak, but I think in that moment, what they were probably thinking is based on how Albon crashed and he came out of
Yeah.
the wall. There was a big cloud of dust there, and there was a very close on board. You can saw with the Haas of how close he was to hitting Albon. Now, I'm not saying if they were at full speed, but I'm saying if they didn't slow down and he makes one wrong move, he goes into the side of Albon. And it's again, it's like, yeah, you could say and I understand that maybe after Albon had cleared, they didn't need to run the safety car for as long as they did. It could have been a quick VSC, everyone slow down because this like a yellow flag for a small section of the track, and then the rest of the part is green, like how it is in some areas, in some instances where it's like, okay, only sector one, this turn is slow because this is where Albon is. Everywhere else, you can kind of like speed up a little bit and kind of like get back up to racing speed and just resume the racing speed. Because I think that's the better way to do it. Obviously, I know like that's not how the rules work, but I'm saying it's another suggestion, a way that possibly then you're not having this bogged down race where you're having these stops and starts constantly. And because I think in that moment it was a moment of safety. It was an issue of safety for Albon and for the other drivers as well because that big cloud of dust there. Yeah, there was the sand on track and you've raced with sand on there because drivers have gone off and then raced through it. But I just think that because that cloud of dust and that sight of visibility was very low, it's crucial that they made the right call in terms of pulling out the yellow flag. As much as some people might not like it because it might have screwed over potentially race strategies, someone in the lead, someone's built up a big gap. I know Verstappen wasn't happy after the second red flag because he built up like the first red flag because he built up a 10-second gap, and all of a sudden now Hamilton on fresh tires is right behind him, right? And he hadn't been good on the race restarts, and I was stressed as well. I'm like, this is not going to end well. Like I was sitting there, I was like, this is not going to end well here. Like he's on fresh tires, but he's been struggling to get out of the gate. So Hamilton's got a good chance here. He had a good chance to win the race, but it ended up working out in his favor that he was able to stay ahead. But so just to kind of your point on there before you kind of go on to like to further talk about your race grade.
Yeah, no, that I 100% see what you mean. I think at the end of the day, everybody understands that safety for everybody is obviously the number one concern. And, obviously they did a great job with that making the call that they did. But in the moment, it just kind of, like I said, it's in the moment. It's a quick decision. Like
exactly. Yeah.
It's going to be criticized. So,
for sure.
My grade, I also gave it an A. Like I
Yep.
mentioned, it was a great start. The restarts added a ton of drama, and it's kind of like you mentioned, like the race was up here at some points, was down here at other points, then it was back up here. And what you're saying, I was saying this to you earlier, like it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's lap like 35, and Verstappen's in cruise control. So I go and turn it off, and then I wake up the next morning, and everybody's, "Oh my god, did you see the end of the race?" I'm like, no, I didn't see the end of the race. It was 3 in the morning, so I had to go and watch it all again. But yeah,
I was
no,
going to bed, man. I'm
I
not
was going
staying
to
up for
bed
that.
like a normal person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I definitely gave it an A. I think when you look at the bigger picture, it was definitely an entertaining race from start to finish.
For sure.
When you look at the preview for our next race, Azerbaijan, like you had mentioned, what are some
Right.
things you're looking out for?
I kind of mentioned this like earlier when I was talking about reliability. I think every team over the next couple of weeks will be looking at their engines, looking at their cars, running multiple tests, running as much wind tunnel simulations as they're allowed to, based on the regulations, based on kind of where they're determined of how many runs they can do, because they want to determine what this issue is potentially with each of their cars. Because it was Perez, had brake issues. Leclerc, like last in Bahrain, had DNF. Obviously, it wasn't because of his reliability issue, but Who knows? It could have something could have caused that, or something could have potentially caused that. Like George Russell had a DNF as well this week. So Mercedes is going to be looking at that. That's one thing. The next thing is what I mentioned as well, is the fact that obviously that it's going to be very hot in Azerbaijan. I have a feeling that's what's going to be the temperature. It's April. It's going to be really warm. So in that moment, I think the tires going to be really, really hot. Engines are going to be running hot. It's going to make for an interesting race to see how teams deal with that. The heat and what they're able to do to counteract potential issues that they may come up throughout the race, throughout the weekend. It's qualifying, practice, whatever the section may be. Those are kind of my two things to look for, as well as potentially what will happen with Aston Martin and Mercedes. And if Red Bull's dominance will continue or not, because that's kind of the ever long, aging saga of this season, is like, how much longer will Red Bull potentially dominate this season, or not dominate, but just, have Max Verstappen really win another race. So, because as of right now, he's won 2 to 3 races this year, like the first and third race of the season. So, we'll see what happens. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm expecting a big day from Perez, kind of building off of your point of, the temperature is going to be warm, tire management, reliability issues are all things to keep in mind. And, there's no one better really to manage tires than Sergio Perez. So I am anticipating he has a great weekend. Another thing, don't quote me on this, but I believe there's only going to be two DRS zones. I know last year they only had 2 in Baku, and I couldn't find anything this early on, I guess, for how many DRS zones are going to be added this year, because we just had 4 in Australia, which was crazy. But yeah. So I'm expecting, if it is only two DRS zones like last year, we saw a lot of chaos on a lot of the corners and a lot of the turns last year. So I'm kind of expecting something similar to that. I'm expecting a lot of moves to be made in those tight corners and on those turns, just because the straights kind of don't really allow you to, use DRS to your advantage, and
unless you're Red Bull and you have a massive DRS advantage. But again, Red Bull's probably up in front anyways, so it won't. They won't apply. It doesn't apply. They won't really be using DRS. If anything, Sergio Perez might be using DRS and Max Verstappen if he can get close enough. But we'll see.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm like I said, mostly Perez. I'm expecting him to have a good day or a good weekend, and then I'm expecting a lot of action on these corners and these turns.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, I think Azerbaijan is kind of that circuit where you can get a lot of moves done into corners. If it's late breaking moves, it's a very aggressive moves for sure, because a lot of overtakes that we see happen actually, through DRS and through down the back straight usually, or not the back straight, but usually the 2 straights on the track with the DRS zones. A lot of overtakes are done there, and sometimes they don't always aren't close enough. Again, you have to really be probably within 3-4 tenths of the car and have DRS. Now, if you're Red Bull, maybe 5 or 6 tenths, and you'll be okay, because based on that, the straight line speed that the Red Bull has is absolutely maddening. Like down the straights, and now it's able to close in on its prey, might I say, of the drivers. It's just absolutely insane. But those are kind of fully agree. Those are great things to look out for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix.
Yep.
All right, that wraps up this episode of the Debrief, and we will see you in a couple weeks for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku. And that's all. Have a nice night. Peace.